You checked your balance this morning and felt that small drop in your stomach even though nothing on the screen was actually wrong. Or a friend just announced they bought a house and you spent the rest of the evening doing quiet math about where you stand. Or maybe it was 2 a.m. and you were awake cataloging everything you haven't saved yet, every year you started late, everyone your age who seems 3 steps ahead. That feeling always tells the same story, that everybody else figured out something you missed. My name is William, and today I'm holding that story up against actual numbers because there are 8 measurable signs you're doing better financially than you think, and most people carrying that 2 a.m. feeling pass more of them than they would ever guess. Before the first sign, it's worth naming the assumption doing the damage here because it runs quietly underneath every one of those moments. The assumption is that feeling behind is evidence of being behind. It isn't. Your financial life has a scoreboard and a feeling, and they are 2 different instruments. The scoreboard is arithmetic, what came in, what went out, what's left, and which direction it's moving. The feeling is assembled from your neighbor's new truck, a cousin's resort photos, and whichever stranger the algorithm decided to show you at your most tired. The scoreboard updates when your numbers change. The feeling updates when someone else's do. So the feeling was never measuring your household at all, only your exposure to other people's highlights. Now, the backdrop these signs get measured against, because the actual bar in this country is far lower than your feed suggests. The Federal Reserve's latest Household Well-Being Survey found that 63% of American adults could cover a surprise $400 expense with cash or its equivalent, which means more than a third of the country could not. 18% of adults said the largest emergency they could handle from savings alone is under $100. The national personal savings rate is running around 4.5%, less than half its long-run average, and the median 401k balance across Vanguard's entire record-keeping platform sits at $44,115, and that figure includes people who are a few years from retirement. Hold those 4 numbers because every sign on this list is measured against them, not against whoever you compared yourself to last night. The 8 signs then, and one thing to be clear about before the first, none of these are participation trophies. Each one is a checkable number or a measurable behavior, the kind that actually predicts where a household lands 10 years out. Passing them means passing against data, not against encouragement. Pass fewer than you'd like, and you'll at least leave knowing which lever to pull next.
Sign number 1. A $400 surprise would not require borrowing. The Federal Reserve has asked some version of this question every year for over a decade, and it has become the single most watched measure of financial resilience the government tracks. If a dead alternator or a cracked tooth showed up this week and you could cover it from checking, savings, or a card you'd pay off at the next statement, you pass. And you pass ahead of 37% of American adults who would have to borrow, sell something, or leave it unpaid. Look at the floor underneath that statistic for a second, because it's lower than most people imagine. Nearly 1 in 5 adults reports that the largest emergency they could absorb from savings alone is under $100, not $400, $100. If your cushion clears the $400 bar with room to spare, you're not scraping along the bottom of anything. You're standing on the resilient side of the most basic dividing line in American household finance, and you crossed it while feeling, apparently, like you were failing. The scoreboard and the feeling disagreeing already. 1 sign in. Sign number 2. There is any gap at all between what comes in and what goes out. Not an impressive gap, any gap. The national personal savings rate is hovering around 4.5% of disposable income, and separate surveys put more than 4 in 10 Americans below $1,000 in total savings, which means a positive savings rate of any size is not the baseline, it's the achievement. Take a woman named Maya, who moves $150 a month into savings automatically and considers it embarrassing because the internet told her real savers put away thousands. On a $52,000 income, her $150 is a 3.5% personal savings rate, within sight of the national figure, running on autopilot every single month without fail. And small automatic numbers compound in a way sporadic large ones never manage. $150 monthly at a 7% return is roughly $26,000 in 10 years, built by a transfer she stopped noticing 2 years ago. Maya feels behind. Maya is measurably ahead of the typical American household on the one behavior that predicts wealth better than income does. The gap is the engine. The size can come later. Sign number 3. Your debt is boring. Boring means fixed rate, fixed payment, shrinking balance, a mortgage on schedule, a car loan partway done, a student loan being ground down month by month. The dangerous kind is the revolving kind, and the average credit card carrying a balance in this country charges north of 21%, which is why the same dollar of debt can be a tool on one statement and a trap on another. Now, consider a man named Dan, because Dan shows what happens when the feeling grabs the wheel. Dan's scoreboard was genuinely fine. Steady job, about $30,000 in a 401k, one car loan at 6%. But Dan felt behind, and the feeling wanted one dramatic fix. He cashed out the retirement account to kill the loan in a single stroke, and the move cost him income tax on the full amount, a 10% early withdrawal penalty on top, and every year of compounding that $30,000 had left in it. He traded a boring 6% problem for a permanent hole to make a feeling go away for one weekend. If your debts are the kind that bore you, that's not a footnote. That's a passing grade Dan would take back in a heartbeat.
Sign number 4. You can name your numbers without opening an app. Try it right now. Your rent or mortgage payment. Roughly what landed in your checking account last month. Roughly what left. If you can get within 10% of the truth on all 3, you hold more operational awareness of your own finances than a large share of households ever build. And awareness is the sign that carries the others, because nobody fixes a number they can't name. Here's the part worth sitting with. The households in genuine freefall usually can't answer those questions, and not because the math is hard, because not looking has become the last comfortable option left. Avoidance is the real signature of financial trouble, far more reliable than any balance. So the fact that you know your numbers, that you check them, that a wrong-looking figure registers in your stomach at all, means the monitoring system works. An alarm that goes off is not a malfunction. It's the reason houses with smoke detectors burn down less often. Sign number 5. Something automatic flows toward retirement at any size. The median 401k balance across Vanguard's platform is $44,115, and that median includes workers deep into their 50s, which tells you how modest the typical American trajectory really is. Against that backdrop, a boring 3 or 4% of your paycheck disappearing into a 401k before you ever see it puts your path ahead of the typical one, even on days the balance looks like a rounding error next to what the internet calls enough. And if any employer match is being collected along the way, you're banking the only guaranteed instant return in all of personal finance, 50 cents to a dollar handed over for every dollar you contribute. A 50 to 100% gain on contact that no fund manager alive can promise. The balance is not the sign. Plenty of large balances were built late and lucky. The pipe is the sign, the automatic flow that keeps working through markets you don't watch and months you don't think about it. If the pipe exists, the trajectory exists. Sign number 6. Your last raise outran your fixed costs. This one takes 2 bank statements to check. One from around 2 years ago and one from last month. Compare the recurring charges, housing, cars, subscriptions, insurance, against income in both. If income rose 10% and the fixed costs rose 5%, you captured the difference. And capturing raises is the entire mechanism by which ordinary incomes turn into real net worth. Most households never notice this test exists because lifestyle inflation is silent by design. The nicer apartment, the newer lease, the upgraded everything arrive one reasonable decision at a time, and each one converts future flexibility into a permanent monthly obligation. Nobody feels it happening, which is exactly why the statements have to be compared side by side, since memory will swear nothing changed. If your fixed costs held their share while your income grew, You passed a test that quietly separates the households that compound from the households that just cycle at higher volume.
Sign number 7. You have already survived a financial emergency without a spiral. A woman named Rosa had a brake job land on her in February. $900, unplanned, non-negotiable. She paid it from savings, trimmed the following month's spending, and refilled the cushion by spring. No card balance riding forward, no borrowed money, no cascade into the next month's rent. 6 weeks after it happened, it was simply over. That is a completed stress test, and it's worth more than any projection, because past behavior under real pressure is the strongest predictor of future behavior that exists anywhere in finance. If somewhere in your last few years there's a version of that story, the car repair, the vet bill, the emergency flight home, absorbed and closed without a spiral, then your system has already done the thing financial systems exist to do. You're not wondering whether you could handle a shock. You're remembering that you did and forgetting to count it. And sign number 8, the one that sounds backwards, you still worry about money. After 7 signs asking you to measure, this one asks you to reread the worry itself, because that 2 a.m. arithmetic is not the evidence of failure it claims to be. Worry means engagement. The households in genuine collapse usually crossed into avoidance long ago. Unopened statements, unchecked balances, the peace of deliberately not knowing. You don't get to feel anxious about a trajectory you refuse to look at. So the discomfort that brought you to a video like this one is itself diagnostic. The sound of someone still keeping score, still steering, still in the game. The worry was never the problem. It was only ever pointed at the wrong instrument, aimed at the feed when it should have been aimed at the scoreboard. And a worry aimed at the scoreboard has a different name. It's called attention. And attention is the raw material every other sign on this list is built from.
Now, before the closing piece, tally it. 1 point per sign, your number out of 8. Down in the comments. Partly because reading them tells me what to break down next, but mostly because writing a number down converts a feeling into a measurement, and that conversion is the entire skill. Because step back and look at what all 8 signs have in common. Not one of them can be read off someone else's life. Cushions, gaps, boring debts, named numbers, automatic pipes, captured raises, survived emergencies, even the worry. Every single one lives on your scoreboard and nowhere else. The list is one instruction repeated 8 different ways. Measure, don't feel. The measuring takes maybe an hour a quarter, and the feeling takes everything else you give it. And the instruction has a price tag when it's ignored, because feeling broke while being fine causes real, countable damage. It declines employer matches, which is turning down a guaranteed 50 to 100% return out of the sense that small contributions are pointless. It makes Dan's move, converting a healthy $30,000 balance into a tax bill, a penalty, and a permanent gap. It spins because the fastest relief for feeling behind has always been buying something that photographs like catching up on a card that charges 21% for the privilege. Every one of those wounds is self-inflicted, and every one starts with trusting the feeling over the number. Add it up across a decade, and the feeling becomes a 5-figure expense, paid out in declined matches, penalty taxes, and interest on purchases that were really painkillers, none of which the feeling ever sends a receipt for. Compressed to 1 line each, so all 8 walk out the door with you. A $400 surprise wouldn't need borrowing. Some gap exists between what comes in and what goes out. Your debt is boring and shrinking. You can name your numbers without looking. Something automatic floats toward retirement. Your last raise outran your fixed costs. You've already survived one emergency without a spiral, and you still care enough to worry. Now, go back to this morning, the balance check and the drop in your stomach. the friend with the house, the 2 a.m. inventory of everything unsaved. None of those moments contained information about your finances. They contained information about your comparisons, and comparisons don't compound, don't earn interest, and don't show up on a net worth statement anywhere on earth. The scoreboard was sitting right there the whole time, unglamorous, accurate, and quietly on your side. Picture two people with identical scoreboards. Same $52,000 income, same $9,000 cushion, same boring car loan on schedule. The first one measures, checks the actual numbers a few times a year, watches the direction, adjusts one lever at a time. The second one feels, grades every week against the feed, and keeps buying small pieces of relief. The trim package, the trip that fixed nothing, the upgrades that photograph like progress. Same starting numbers, same income, same decade. At the end of it, the first person's quiet 4% gap has compounded into the beginning of actual wealth, and the second is still exactly where the feeling always leaves people, slightly behind, freshly reminded, reaching for the next small relief. The only difference between them was which instrument they believed. Run it forward one more decade, and the gap stops being subtle, because by then one of them is deciding when work becomes optional, and the other is still explaining to themselves why the feed always wins. None of these 8 signs mean much, though, without understanding what the scoreboard itself is built from, how compounding turns a high-yield account paying around 4% into money that earns money, why a match doubles $1 on contact, what makes a fixed rate safe and a revolving one corrosive, and how direction beats size every single decade. That groundwork is waiting in a full breakdown on this channel, for whenever the 2 a.m. version of you is ready to stop grading against strangers and start reading your own scoreboard instead.